Be'ezras Hashem, today's daf is daf Tzadik Zayin, and we will begin Yevamos daf Tzadik Vav, Amud Sheni. You can see it from here. Let me just see how I can, by the Rashi of the Mishnah, about 3 lines down, there's a place called Azal. That's where we'll begin. Azal. And then basically, it's simple, Gemara, but today's Gemara, you're probably going to need towards the end just the pictures that I'm going to show on the screen. 5 pictures, very important, and that makes it easier to explain. Anyway, the Mishnah said, let's get it bigger. The Mishnah said, we know that the Torah says that for a woman that falls to Yibam, what are you supposed to do? You have to have, the only way to make her your wife is to have intercourse, have relations with her. Bia, uba aleha. But Chazal said that if the man, the Yavam, gives her a kedushin, right? If he gives her a kedushin, that's called maimer. So then he's like reserving this Yavama for him, and therefore it's a quasi-wife. Let's call her a quasi-wife. And nobody else, none of the other brothers have the right to miyabin this woman. If one brother gave kedushin to that woman, and he's also b'krai v'seham, etc. That's called maimer. Then the Mishnah discussed another thing, what's called, let's say one of the brothers of this Yavama that's falling to Yibam was a 9-year-old kid. And what he did was, he can't give Kedushin because he has no power to give to Kedushin. He's just 9 years old, but he had relations with the Yavama, this adult. So this 9-year-old kid had relations with this Yavama. So the din is, so the Mishnah says that's called maimer. That's called a kinyan. And none of the other brothers can do Yibam. And we were going to wait till this 9-year-old grows older, and then he could fully marry this Yavama. So basically, it has some power. The power of a 9-year-old doing Yibam is like the maimer of a gadol. That's what Rabbi Yochanan said. Okay, you don't need that much of an introduction for the Gemara, but you just should know what he said. Also, I'm just going to point out where my pointer is. Also, Bias Bentes, the 9-year-old kid doing relations with the Yavama, is like a Medrabanan type of Yibum. It's like Kamam or Begadol. That's what Rabbi Yochanan said, that it's like as if a Gadol gave Kedushin to the Yavama. Okay, here we go. So that was the Chiddush of Rabbi Yochanan explaining the Mishnah, among other things. So the Gemara says over here, also Rabbi Lazar said, Amma l'shmaitza b'meid madrasha. He said over this teaching of Rabbi Yochanan in the Beis Medrash of what the story is with a young child doing bia for Yavama. But he said it over, it looked like Rabbi Lazar himself came up with the idea, and he like Amra Mishmeid Rabbi Yochanan. And Rabbi Lazar did not say it over in the name of Rabbi Yochanan. And his Rebbe is Rabbi Yochanan. Right? So if you hear a Dvar Torah and you go home and say it over to your family, and you don't say that the rabbi in shul said it. So when Rabbi Yochanan, Shama Rabbi Yochanan heard that Rabbi Lazar is going around telling over the teaching and not saying it over in his name, in his own personal name, Ikbid. So he went ballistic. He was so upset at Rabbi Lazar. How could you not tell everybody that I am the one that came up with this idea? So Ul Legabe Rab Ami Rabasi. So Rab Ami and Rabasi visited Rabbi Yochanan and they wanted to placate the situation. Amrulay, so they told Rabbi Yochanan, Loi ka hoya amasa bebeis hakneses shel Tiberia. Wasn't this the same story in the shul in Tiberia? What's the story over there? But there was this type of bolt in a door that it was deemed to be muktzah. Why? Because it was not usable as anything else. So it was a type of bolt in the door that was considered to be muktzah. But this one, benagar, this type of bolt, sheyesh beroishe glustera, it had like a solid ball at the end of it. So it's this like metal piece, which you would think is muktzah, but it has like a hammer type bulb on the top, which can be used as a keli for something. Shenechluku by Rab Lazar Rab Yosi. They had an argument. Is it muktzah or is it not muktzah? Rab Lazar and Rab Yosi had an argument. Ad shekaru Sefer Torah b'chamas. They were so angry that they ripped the Sefer Torah in their anger. So the Gemara said means, what do you mean? They beating each other up and that they ripped the Sefer Torah. arguing over the point. Would you think that they ripped it on purpose or they ripped it during the discussion? Ella Ema, rather say Shnikra Sefer Torah b'chamasam. In their anger, by accident, they ripped the Sefer Torah. Each one, I guess, in those days, they learned from a Sefer Torah. So each one was proving their point by pulling the Sefer Torah in their direction and pointing, here's where it says. And the other one pulled it in the other direction and pointing to his idea. And by pulling the Sefer Torah to each other, the Sefer Torah got ripped. V'hayasham Rabbi Yossi ben Kisma. Rabbi Yossi ben Kisma was present at that story, and he saw they ripped the Sefer Torah, discussing in a heated debate. Amar, he said, Tameani, I'm wondering, this shul is going to eventually turn into a house of Avodah Zarah, right? A Beis Tuma, a church. It came that way. Because they were so angry, and being angry is like worshiping idols, eventually that shul where they had that argument was eventually sold for Avodah Zarah. So what did he want to point out, Rabbi Rabasi? He said, Rabbi Yochanan, be very careful. Don't make a big deal of what Rabbi Lazar did or is doing. Let it go. Let it go. Because if you have an argument with something and you get into a very heated debate, bad things can happen. The shul that you had the argument that these Rabbi Rabasi had a different argument turned into an Avodah Zarah. So that was how Rabbi Ami and Rabbi Asi was trying to placate Rabbi Yochanan to say, let it go. Interestingly enough, that the shul turned into Avodah Zarah. I just remember as a kid always going down Eastern Parkway and traveling through different parts of Brooklyn, and you can see that certain former temples or shuls actually were turned into churches. And you could see the Magen David over there. A couple of them come to mind. Anyway, as neighborhoods changed. And so you see this concept in the Gemara itself. Anyway, Rabbi Yochanan was not placated. He said, he got even more angrier. He said, Rabbi Ami, Rabbi Asi can argue, yes, because they're contemporaries. Chavru Sanami, is he my friend? Is Rabbi Lazar my student? He's not my friend, and therefore he should be saying the teaching over in my name. So Ul Lagabe Rabbi Yaakov Bar Idi. So Rabbi Yaakov Bar Idi went into Rabbi Yochanan's office, and he decided to try to make peace between Rabbi Lazar and Rabbi Yochanan. And he came up with another idea. Amalei, it says in the pasuk, Ka'asher tziva Hashem es Moshe avdoi, just the way Hashem commanded Moshe his servant, Kain tziva Moshe es Yeshua, so Moshe commanded Yeshua, v'chein asu Yeshua, lo hesed davim mikol asher tziva Hashem es Moshe. Yeshua did precisely everything that he was commanded by Moshe, and he not deviate one iota from any command that Moshe gave him. Now, in the Tanakh, Yeshua being the only student of Moshe, the prime student of Moshe, he doesn't always quote Moshe Rabbeinu. It sounds like he's saying things on his own. On everything that Yeshua said, did he say that this is what Moshe said to me? Ella, rather, Yeshua would teach his teachings and lecture anonymously, but everybody knew that this Torah he's saying over from Moshe Rabbeinu. So Rabbi Lazar Talmidcha, Rabbi Yaakov Bar Idi continued and said, your student Rabbi Lazar, everybody knows that Yoshe V'Darish Stam, when he's teaching anonymously, everybody knows that's his. So just that, like you see by Yeshua, he didn't always say that this is what Moshe said, but we always understand anything that Yeshua said, he must have been taught by Moshe Rabbeinu. So Rabbi Lazar is the same way. He says it over, and it seems like he's coming up with a novel idea, but everybody knows it comes from you. And that way, Rabbi Yaakov Bar Idi trying to quiet down Rabbi Yochanan's hakpada. Amar lehem, so Rabbi Yochanan said, I'm satisfied. And he told Rabbi Ami, Rabbi Asi, who were the first people try to quiet Rabbi Yochanan, you should learn how to quiet people. You should learn how to appease people the way this Rabbi Idi did. How come you don't know how to appease me? Keben Idi, like this Rabbi Yaakov Bar Idi, Chavrenu, our friend. So that ends the story of Rabbi Yochanan having a hakpada, was concerned that Rabbi Lazar is saying over the teaching, not in his name. So now the Gemara asks, but why was he concerned? What's the difference? Rabbi Yochanan, my tama kapet kulahai. Why was Rabbi Yochanan so concerned that the teaching wasn't said over in his name? Answers the Gemara, the Amar Rabbi Yehuda Amar Rav. Rabbi Yehuda said in the name of Rav, my diksiv, why does the pasuk say that David HaMelech says to God, Ogura b'olcha olamim, I'm going to live in your tents, both in the two worlds, both in this world and in the Olam Haba. So the Gemara asks, what did David HaMelech say? I'm going to live in both places at the same time. How could I live on planet Earth and yet be in Olam Haba at the same time? Can a man live in two worlds? Either you're on planet Earth or you're in Olam Haba, not both. David said to God, Master of the world, Yehi Ratzayin, let it be your will. We go to Tzadik Zayin. That people should say over my teachings in this world, and people should constantly quote me. And why is that? The Amar Rabbi Yochanan Shimon ben Yochai, in the name of Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, was taught Kol Talmud Chacham, any Talmud Chacham, Rabbi, Sha'imrim Dvar Shmua Mipiv, they say over a teaching in his name, Ba'olam Hazeh, even though he long passed on, his lips, so to speak, are moving in the grave. His lips are moving. It's almost like he is alive. I don't know what that means, but that's what it says. So that's why Rabbi Yochanan felt that if you're saying over a teaching, make sure you're saying it over in my name, because when I pass on, people should always know I was the one that came up with this chiddush, and therefore my lips will be constantly moving in the grave, although I'm in Olam Haba. Hence, that's why, by the way, you always say David Melech Yisrael Chai V'Kayam. David Melech Yisrael is constantly alive, because there's no person in history we're always saying over what they said, because Tehillim is David wrote the Tehillim, and everything that we do has to do with Tehillim. So he's alive, although he's in the next world, his lips are murmuring in his grave, as we say his teachings. Amar Rabbi Yitzchak ben Ze'era v'yitema Shimon Nazira. Rabbi Yitzchak ben Ze'era said this teaching, and some say Shimon the Nazir. You see, there were Nazirim, last week Sedra. He said this. My crop, there's another pasuk. Where's the pasuk that you see that the lips are moving in the grave? Where did Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai get it from? So he got it from a pasuk in Shir HaShirim. Pasuk says, V'chikeich, the upper part of the mouth, kiyein toiv, is like good wine. Hoylech doidi l'meisharim, it goes straight to my beloved smoothly. Doive sifshe yeshenim, making the lips, the old people, lips start quivering. So we darshan, kekoy meshel anovim, that it's like grapes that are heated up. When you put grapes in a basket prior to you squeezing them, you let them heat up so that the juice of the grape comes out much quicker. And therefore, when the grapes are heated up, just like a heated up grapes, as soon as you put your finger on it, right away, it starts to quiver and juices start to come out. Since when you start teaching a teaching of them in this world, the lips start moving in the grave. So that was the point of the whole thing. It's brought from a pasuk teaching Rav Shimon ben Yochai that a person should, when they say over a teaching in his name, his lips are moving in this world as well. So he could be in Olam Haba and his lips are moving in the grave. I'm not sure what the benefit of that, but that's what it is. That's what the Gemara says. The Gemara continues. In the Mishnah, it said a statement that, what did the Mishnah say? Let's go back. The Mishnah said, at the end of the Mishnah, it says, Echad ben Tashona b'yam echad. You can be a 20-year-old guy, okay, and you're considered like a katan, as long as you didn't bring 2 hairs. If you didn't bring 2 hairs under your armpit or whatever, or so if you're a 9-year-old or a 20-year-old, you're not considered to be somebody that could do yibam 100%, right? So therefore, your yibam is a good yibam, right? But you can't consummate that yibam. So if you die, the other brothers could do chalitza. but you're still involved in the Yibam, although you're a Katan. So basically what the Gemara Mishnah says, that a 20-year-old could have dinim like a Katan as long as he didn't bring two hairs to prove that he's a Gadol. So the Gemara asks, we're on Tzadik Zayim, or Minu, let's ask you a question. Ben Esrim Shana, if somebody's 20 years old, Shlehevi Shtei Sa'aras, he didn't bring two hairs. So then, and a woman falls to Yibam to him, right? Or he's the husband, right? But let's say a woman falls to Yibam to this person, Yavi Arayish Ben Esrim. If he proves that he's 20 years old, V'hu Hasaris, and he proves that also that he's a eunuch, that means he's somebody that will never grow any hair. So then, loy choylitz v'loy miyabim. There's no chalitza and no yibam, because since he's somebody that cannot have children, so if he's the only brother, then that woman could leave without any chalitza, because he's exempt from the whole mitzvah, although he's 20 years old. So you see the stira already in our Mishnah, a 20-year-old that didn't bring two saras should do yibam and should do yibam, and it's like a quasi yibam until he gets older. And here the Mishnah says that when you're 20 years old, you're not, and you don't bring two saras, you're considered two hairs, you're considered to be a eunuch, you're exempt from the whole mitzvah. And the same holds true by the woman. A girl who's 20 years old, that she didn't bring two hairs, Yavi Raya, she bas esrim, be islandess. You prove to me that she's 20 years old and that she's an islandess, somebody who's undeveloped woman, and therefore she can never have children. So if she falls to Yibam, she doesn't have chalitza, not Yibam. So our Mishnah seems to contradict by saying, no, a 20-year-old guy is still obligated in the mitzvah of Yibam. And here the Brisa says you're 20 years old, and if you're not developing, you're pater from the Yibam of chalitza. So the Gemara answers, it's not a stira. Ha'itma Allah. We learned, Amrab Shmuel Bar Yitzchak Amarav, who shenol deloy simoni sarez. You could be 20 years old, and you have to be proving that you're a eunuch. In other words, there are certain simonim that we learned what makes somebody a eunuch. So I believe here we had it over here. Turner Abanan on Daf Pei Yomid Beis. The Brisa says you have to bring the Eluhain Simonim. If you don't have a beard and this male has hair looks whitish, or he has very smooth skin, or somehow when he urinates, he can't make an arc, right? So the Gemara gives you all these types of, or if he goes to the bathhouse and his skin is not coming up with heat, he takes a hot shower and he's not heating up. You don't see steam coming from his body. But this proves, so there at already 20, he's already demonstrating. He already demonstrated that he is somebody that is a saris. Then 20 together with that proved he's a eunuch, and therefore there you're not obligated in some money. Our Mishnah is talking about a 20-year-old did not prove with the signs of saris. Amarava Dekinami Diktani Vua Saris Shmamino. That Brisa said, that Mishnah said, Vua Saris. He's not only 20, but he's also proven that he's a eunuch. So then, by Koilitz William Yamas. So now we're left with one problem. Let's say a guy doesn't have the simonim of a eunuch. Okay, let's say he could arc with his urine, but he doesn't have hair on his beard, or he can't show pubic hair. So how long do you wait to say, how long does he wait until we can for sure assume that he's a eunuch? How long do you wait? Until like he's over 35. So if he's over 35 years old, because most people will live till 70, according to Gemara. So if he's over 35 and he never brought a simone saris, he doesn't have the signs of saris. I think you need all of them. So, and he doesn't have hair on his beard. So then you could assume that he's a eunuch. And then after that, if he gets into a yibam situation, he doesn't do yibam or chalitza. Now, ki asa, the Gemara just says over medical advice, ki asa l'kamei de Rava. When they would bring, let's say, a 20-year-old to Rava, and the guy, we don't know, Is he 20 years old, was still waiting for him to grow here? Or is this kid going to turn, is this 20-year-old going to turn into a eunuch? So Rava would examine him and say, if he is a weak person, so Amalahu, he would tell the parents or whatever his guardians, Zulu Avruhu, feed him, build him up, feed him protein and iron. So maybe he'll grow the hairs that are needed to prove that he's a gadol. The bari, if he is a fat person, right? So, and he's still not showing the hairs, Amalahu zil achashu, he would tell the parents, make him go on a diet. The Hani Simon and these hairs that were required to prove that you're a gadol, zin in the nasre, sometimes they fall out, machmash kichu shusa, because somebody is very weakly. Zin in the nasre, sometimes they fall out, machmas briusa, somebody is too healthy. And therefore, he would advise them to change their diet, and perhaps the hair that are required to prove you're a gadol will grow. I think I heard by over Shavuos that Rabbi Schechter said that there is an opinion that if a person who is like even a child who's a 13-year-old kid, and he's the only one that are duchening, we shouldn't let him duchen because perhaps he hasn't brought the saras of proving that he's a gadol. And therefore, we can't let him go up duchening alone. He has to have somebody who we know for sure is a gadol. So this comes up a lot in shilas, in questions. Well, let's say he's reading the Megillah. You have to ascertain that this is a real gadol to allow him to be mitzi people. Okay, Be'ez Hashem, we're beginning the 11th parak. Noisin, the Mishnah says, Noisin al huanusa va'al hamafuta. That means like this, that if a person had an affair with a woman, okay, that's not his wife, he just had an affair. So then he's allowed to marry that lady's daughter. Let's say that lady had a daughter from somewhere else, from a different marriage. So since this is not your wife, right, you can't marry your wife's daughter. If you marry and your wife has a daughter from somewhere else, a person cannot have relations with that woman, with that girl. But if you just had an affair with somebody, then you can marry that daughter. Or same thing, if you had an affair with somebody, you can marry the mother. Because they're not really a mother-in-law. But if you're married, right, you can't even have an affair with the daughter or the mother of your wife, because that's arayas, chayev. Then you chayev misa for that. Noisei adam, no thing. Noisei adam anusus avim futus avim. If your father had an affair with a woman, so it's not your mother, right? So that woman, the son, could potentially marry. There's no isser. But anusas b'nai and futus b'nai. If your son had an affair with somebody, so it's not his wife, it's not your daughter-in-law, you're allowed to marry that person. Rabbi Yehuda oiseh ba'anusas avav mafutas avav. Rabbi Yehuda said you can't marry the woman that your father had an affair with. Just like you can't marry your father's wife, even if it's not your mother. If your father dies, you can't marry the woman that he had an affair with. Tanina lahad Tanraban. The Gemara begins. The Mishnah is more explained by the following brisa. Anasisha, if a person raped a woman, or we're going to have an affair with a woman, mutar lisa bita, you're permitted to marry the daughter. Nasaisha, but if you married a woman, so she's your wife, also lisa bita, you're not allowed to marry her daughter. So that's what the brisa says. And that explains our Mishnah. So Gemara says, Uruminu, I'll ask you a stira. The Mishnah says, Hanitam min isha, even if you have a rumor, if there's a rumor that you had an affair with a woman, you're not allowed to have you're not allowed to marry her mother, her daughter, or sister. Even just a rumor on an affair with a woman, you can't marry her daughter. And so that's a contradiction to our Mishnah, which says you could marry the daughter. And even if you for sure had an affair, you could marry the daughter. And here the Brisa says you're also in the daughter or the relatives. Answers the Gemara midrabanan, that our midrabanan, the Brisa is midrabanan, you're not allowed to marry the daughter. And the reason is, and this is important, the reason is that if you have an affair with a woman, right, you have an affair with a lady, and then you want to marry her daughter. So you marry her daughter because I were concerned that the mother is going to come over often. And since you once had an affair with the mother, so you might now, by marrying the daughter, the mother is your mother-in-law, you might have relations with that mother-in-law. And here, it's a issa daraisa to have relations there because she's now your mother-in-law. So therefore, midrabanan, if you had an affair with a woman, you can't marry her daughter. So the Gemara says, so then our Mishnah says noisim, but you're permitted to do it lechatchila. Does our Mishnah say that you're permitted to marry the daughter, and it says you're allowed to do it right away? It's not even asa midrabanan. How come our Mishnah says noisim? You're permitted to do it from the very beginning. And says the Gemara, our Mishnah is talking about after the death of the woman that you had an affair with, after the death of the mother. So then you can marry the daughter because there's no chashash anymore, no concern that the mother's coming over. She's dead. But if the mother is alive, midrabanan, you're not allowed to marry the daughter. Now, the Gemara asks, how do I know these words? That if you have an affair with a woman, so she's not considered to be your wife, and therefore, if the affair is over, you're allowed to marry her daughter. How do you know that? You certainly know in the Chumash that you're not allowed to marry your wife's daughter if she has a daughter from another marriage. But how do you know that you're permitted to marry the woman that you have an affair with, her daughter? The Tanur Rabban, the rabbis taught. Most of the time in the Chumash, when it talks about arayos, it says, don't lie with such a person. And here it says, by a mother and daughter relation, it says kicha. It says, kikach ish isha vezima. If a man takes a woman and her mother, so he's doing a terrible thing. Or it says, so it uses the word yikach, as I'm pointing out in Rashi. So therefore, what is the Gemara? What does the Brisa said? The Torah only asks the daughter only if you marry the mother, but not if you lekuchen. The word kiyikach always means that you had a normal marriage. So the Torah is saying, when is the daughter also if you have a normal marriage with the mother? But if you just have an affair with the mother, you're permitted to marry the daughter. Amalei Rapapa said to Baal, Ma'ata Gabe Choyse, Dixit Ish es Yikach es Achoyse, Bas Aviva, Bas Imoy, Hochanami Dar Kicha, Hu also Dar Shchiva also. When the Torah says you can't marry your sister, the Torah uses the word Yikach. And we all know that there's no such a thing of a marriage to a sister. So how can you say that the word Kicha means a marriage? Here in this context, kicha does not mean a marriage when it comes referring to marrying your sister. It means you slept with your sister. It doesn't mean you married your sister. Amalei. So Abaya answered to Rapapa, yes. Sometimes look at the context. The kuchen ksiva b'Torah, when the Torah writes the word yikach, so haroi lekicha kicha. When you can translate it to mean marriage, then you translate it to mean marriage. But haroi l'shchiva shchiva. But when it can only be translated as just sleeping with the woman, then you're translated as sleeping with the woman. So therefore, when it comes to the sister, although the Torah uses the word yikach, it means you slept with your sister. But in other areas, when you marry a woman, and the Torah is saying you can't take the daughter, that means if you married the woman, not if you just slept with the woman. Rava says, I have another source that Anas Isha Muta Lisa Bita, I have it Mehacha. If you have an affair with a woman, you're allowed to marry the daughter. I have it from another place. Another source. Ksiv, the pasuk says, "Ervas bas binchoy bas bitcho loy segala." You're not allowed to have. You're not allowed to marry. You're not allowed to have relations with your granddaughter from your son, or your granddaughter from your daughter. Ha bas bina dida bas bida dida. But if it's your wife's daughter, right? If it's your wife's daughter, so then you're permitted to have relations with that woman, with that daughter or that granddaughter. Gale. And then another pasuk says, "Ksiv." The pasuk says, "Erbas isha bita loy segalas bas banoves bas bita loy sikach." There, the Torah clearly says that a woman, you're not allowed to have a relation with your wife's daughter. How could you resolve the contradiction of Sukkim? One pasuk says you're allowed to have relations with your wife's daughter, and here the pasuk says you are not permitted to have relations with your wife's daughter. Haketzat. How's that possible? If you marry, if it was an oinus, if you had an affair with the woman, then you can't marry the daughter. Then you could marry the daughter. But if you married the woman, you cannot marry the daughter. So the Gemara says, why don't we say the reverse? That's saying that if you have an affair, you can't marry the daughter. But if you married the woman, you could marry the daughter. So the Gemara says, the word, but when it comes to royas, it says the word, they're related to you. When you're married to a woman, you're related to that woman, and therefore you become aser and her daughter. But if you just had an affair with a woman, you're not related to that woman. There's no relations. And therefore, the Torah says that it's permitted to marry that daughter. As we said, that midoraisa it's permitted, midrabanan it's aser. Then we saw in the Mishnah, Rabbi Yehuda Oiseh Ba'anusas Ava. Rabbi Yehuda says you're not allowed to marry if your father had an affair with a woman, and you're not allowed to take that woman as your wife. Amar Rabbi Yehuda prohibited it. Amar Rabbi Gidl Amar Rav. My time with Rabbi Yehuda. What's the reason, Rabbi Yehuda? The ksiv la yikach isha seisha avav. You're not allowed to marry your wife, the wife of your father, his normal wife, even if it's not your mother. And the leigala knaf avav. You're not allowed to uncover the woman that your father slept with. So here, knaf shara avav leigala, the woman that your father slept with, you're not allowed to have relations. So that's the source of Rabbi Yehuda. How do you know that it's talking about that woman that your father had an affair with? The context of the pasuk, the parsha prior to that pasuk, talks about having an affair with a woman. So now this pasuk seems to be similar next to that topic. So therefore, what the Chumash is saying, that if your father had an affair with a woman, the son is not allowed to marry that woman. Rabbanim permit it. What do they do with that pasuk? If this pasuk was right next to the psukim that talking about having an affair with a woman, I would say you're right. But now that they're not next to each other, it's teaching you something else. That a woman that the pasuk's not talking about your father had an affair with a woman. It's talking about your father had a Shemeres Yavam. There was a woman falling to Yibam to him. And therefore, that woman, you're not allowed to marry. My knaf aviv, knaf haroy aviv le'yigav. This woman that potentially could be your father's wife, that woman you can't have relations with. So the Gemara says, that woman that's always falling to Yibam, to your father, is your father's brother's wife. It's your aunt. So it's anyway asar. Let's say it's also because it's your aunt. Answers the Gemara, lava labashnei lavin. The Torah wants to give you two lavin. There are two prohibitions to do with that woman. One, it's your aunt. Two, it's your father's potential wife. The tapik should be shuk. Maybe it's also to you anyway, because a yavama can't marry a strange person, can only marry a yavam until she gets chalitza. So the answer is lava or b'shloish lavin. You get three lavin with this woman. One, it's your father's potential wife. Two, it's your aunt. And three, it's Yevama Lashuk. Yevama cannot marry anybody besides the Yavam. Even the Torah says that even after your father dies, so it's not a Yevama Lashuk because there's no Yavam capable of doing Yibam because your father died. Still, it's also to you of two Lavin. One, it's your aunt. One, it's Knaf Ovis. So anyway, that's the opinion of Rabbanan, what to learn Pshat and Yigala Knaf Ovis. But if your father had an affair with somebody, that's permitted. Let's just quickly go through the Gemara. I'm just going to show the screen over here so you get quickly what's going on here. The Gemara is going to just say 5 riddles over here. Basically, the first riddle is that just names, how is this possible? That's the name of the game over here. The Gemara says over here, Yaakov married Sarah, okay, and he had a son, Reuven, right? And now Yaakov also had an affair with Rivka and had a daughter, Rachel. Okay? And now Reuven married Rivka. His father had an affair with a woman and then died, right? Or whatever, or even if he's alive, Reuven married Rivka. So basically, Rachel can tell Reuven, we are brothers from our father, but not from the mother. And you married my mother. So you're my brother, but you married my mother. And that's even though, and I am the daughter of your wife, Rivka. That's all. So that's the Gemara is saying over here. Ach ma'av v'loy me'aim, a father or the brother, not from the mother. Ru bala, the aim, and it's the husband of the mother. V'ano brata d'inti, I'm the daughter of this lady. How's that possible? The Gemara is going to say 5 riddles, and then the Gemara is going to give you the answer to the riddles. The case that I just pointed out in the picture, which goes not like the case of Rabbi Yehuda, because Rabbi Yehuda does not allow a son to marry the woman that his father had an affair with. And then you could answer this riddle. Riddle number 2. Riddle number 2 is this case over here. You have a goy. This is the Gemara says a very funny case. A goy had a woman. He married a woman, and they had a daughter, Hagar. And then his daughter, the guy, the father, had an affair with his own daughter and had a son, Light. Okay, so the daughter Hagar says to Light, "You are my brother because we share the same father, right?" And then she also says, "But I am your sister. I am the sister to you. We're sisters because I'm your mother. I'm the sister to somebody that I'm carrying on my shoulder." In other words, how is a lady to be able to give birth to his own sister? Okay, if I were to ask you a question, how is it possible for a lady to give birth to his own sister? Well, the answer is if his father, the guy, had an affair with her, so then they have she gives birth to her own brother. Basically, that's what he says. Achu, this boy, this little baby is my brother. Ubrihi, and is my son. Achsase nana, I'm his sister. Davidadrina kaspai, that I am carrying him on my shoulder. Well, this is possible. But by a guy having an affair with his own daughter. Next case. We go to case number 3. Case in the marshal number 3. If guy says, "Oh, look at this. Look how special my son is." Either Kachama married a woman, okay, and they had a daughter, Ada. And then afterwards, that daughter had another daughter, Hagar. And then the grandfather had an affair with his granddaughter, and they had a son, Light. So the granddaughter says to Light, "You are my son. I'm the daughter of your sister. Your sister is Ada, because we both share the grandfather is both my mother and your father. My mother and your father are the same. My mother's father and your father are the same. So therefore, that can only happen by the guy. Okay, so that's what he's saying. Shlama lach bri. Hello, my son. Bas aches anach. I'm the daughter of your sister. How could that be? Mishkachas law begoy haba bas bita. That could be possible with a guy having an affair with his granddaughter. Now it goes another marshal. Another marshal is, think of this marshal, those that are working people. He says, here's the marshal. Akam has the relations with a woman, right? And they have a son, Lavan, all right? And Goy has a wife, and he has a son, Lavan. Lavan has a daughter, Hagar. The Akam has a relation with Hagar. This is basically the same thing. It's his granddaughter from his son. So, and he has an affair. The guy had an affair with his granddaughter, and now they have another son, Light. So therefore, Hagar says, I'm giving you a riddle, but basically he says, how is this possible that my son that I'm carrying on my shoulder, it's my son, but it's also I am the daughter of his brother. And that's possible. I'm the daughter. Light's brother is actually Lavan, because they both share the same father, the guy. And Hagar is the daughter of Lavan, which is the brother of Light from the father. So Lavan and Light are both brothers. Anyway, that's the riddle number 3. Riddle number 4. So what does he say over here? Deloy dalva lipo b'chi seisa pesa. Those that are trying to fetch water, even you can figure out this riddle. That I'm carrying on my shoulder, this infant is my son. I'm the daughter of his brother. A goy that had an affair with the daughter of his son. Then the next case is 3 more. And then that brings us to the mission. Then we'll start. All right, 3 more. I'm sorry, but just to go 1 minute overtime here. But the 3 more riddles over here. Basically, Lemach had relations with Ada. Lemach married Ada. They had a son, Yaval, a guy Yaval. And Yaval had an affair with Hagar. Okay? Yaval had an affair with Hagar. So Lemach, and then the grandfather, the father Lemach had another relation with Hagar. So not only did Hagar have let's get it straight. Lemach married Ada. Okay, they had Yovel. This is one. Then Yovel had an affair with his mother and had a daughter, Hagar. Then the grandfather had an affair with that Hagar and had two more children, Lot and Lavan. So basically, Hagar says, I'm so upset on Yovel. He doesn't want to support his brothers because he's related to me in so many different ways. He's my husband. Because he had an affair with me. We're brothers, okay? And he's my husband, and he's the son of my husband, and I'm the husband of his mother. All these relations, and he still doesn't want to have an affair with me. It's not clear why the Gemara is all bringing this in. Let's stop over here. A guy that came on relations with his mother. Okay, I'm going to stop by riddle number 5. Riddle number 4, and that's where we'll stop, and we'll do 2 more riddles tomorrow, and then we start new inyanim. Okay.
What are the words we left?
3 lines from the wide lines. Basically, what the Gemara is just giving you a riddle of how is this possible, and you have to figure it out. Remember the riddle with the guy who's operating. A man and his son were in a bad car accident, and then the son comes into the surgery, and the surgeon says, I can't operate on this person. It's my son.
It's the mother, but that's an old joke.
That's an old joke.
Nowadays, it's not the same.
Right. In my days, this was a big joke, right? So it's funny that the Gemara is just going through these riddles, and how is this possible? So we'll do 2 more tomorrow. You'll get it clearer, and then we'll go fly through the Mishnah.
I only heard the end of this story because the sound was breaking up again. They're driving the car.
No, the father and son were in a car accident. The father got killed. The son was taken to the hospital, and the surgeon was about to operate, and the surgeon says, I can't operate because it's my son. How's that possible? The answer is, it was his mother, the surgeon. Okay. But the same thing, the Mishnah is going through the same thing. But basically, it's Goyim having an affair with their daughter or granddaughter, and therefore the child is related in so many different ways.
It can only happen in the South.
Yes, that's right. Or in, yes.